The champagne was flowing, the diamonds were sparkling, and Dean Martin was drunk. Or at least he was playing drunk, which was his signature move. It was March 3, 1972, at the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, the most exclusive casino gala of the year. 2,000 of America's richest, most powerful people filled the showroom. Movie stars, casino owners, politicians, and mobsters pretending to be businessmen. Everyone who was anyone in 1972 was there. Sitting at table 7, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, was Muhammad Ali. Dean Martin spotted him from the stage, and his eyes lit up with that mischievous glint that every television viewer in America recognized. When Dean got that look, something was about to happen. Usually something inappropriate, always something entertaining. What happened in the next 22 minutes would become one of the most talked about moments in Las Vegas history. But the story would stay buried for 40 years, until Dean Martin's son revealed the full truth in 2012. And when he did, it would change how people saw both men forever. This is what really happened the night Dean Martin tried to humiliate Muhammad Ali in front of America's elite, and how Ali's response destroyed Martin's carefully constructed persona, exposed the pain behind the laughter, and made the most famous entertainer in America break down, crying like a child. If this story moves you, subscribe for more untold encounters between legends that reveal the humanity behind the fame. Dean Martin was at the absolute peak of his fame in 1972. The Rat Pack era with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. had made him a legend whose influence stretched far beyond entertainment. His television variety show was one of the highest-rated programs in America, watched by millions every week. His drunk playboy persona, the lovable lush who stumbled through songs and charmed everyone with his carefree attitude, had made him millions of dollars and countless devoted fans. But it was all a carefully crafted illusion. Dean Martin rarely drank as much as people thought. He was a businessman, a perfectionist, a man who had meticulously calculated every aspect of his public image. The drinking, the womanizing, the carefree attitude, it was all performance art. It was armor, a way to hide who he really was. Dino Crescetti, the son of an Italian immigrant barber from Steubenville, Ohio, a kid who had grown up poor and scared and determined to become someone his father could never have imagined. Muhammad Ali knew none of this backstory. To Ali, Dean Martin was just another rich white entertainer who had never had to fight for anything real in his life, someone who lived in the comfortable bubble of Hollywood success, while real people faced real struggles in the real world. Ali was at the gala reluctantly. His boxing license had recently been restored after his 3.5-year exile for refusing to serve in Vietnam. He was preparing for his comeback against Jerry Quarry, and his lawyer had convinced him to attend this event for visibility and networking opportunities. Ali hated these gatherings, all these wealthy people spending thousands of dollars on champagne and caviar while people were starving in America's inner cities. But he had agreed to come because he needed to rebuild his public image and financial standing. He shouldn't have come. The Desert Inn's showroom was magnificent that night, dripping with the kind of opulence that only Las Vegas in its golden age could provide. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across tables laden with the finest food and drink money could buy. The guest list read like a who's who of American power: senators, Supreme Court justices, Fortune 500 CEOs, Hollywood royalty, and more than a few figures whose wealth came from less legitimate sources. These were the people who shaped America's policies, controlled its entertainment, and decided its cultural narratives. They paid $500 per plate, equivalent to about 3,000 today, for the privilege of eating, drinking, and being entertained while feeling superior to everyone not wealthy enough to be in that room. Dean Martin commanded the stage like the seasoned performer he was, working his way through his repertoire of songs and jokes with the polished ease of someone who had done this thousands of times. His timing was perfect, his charm was irresistible, and his famous, drunk, persona was in full effect as he stumbled just enough to seem carefree while never missing a beat. Halfway through his performance, right in the middle of singing, "Ain't That a Kick in the Head?" Dean stopped abruptly. He put his hand over his eyes, squinting into the bright stage lights like he was searching for something specific in the audience. Then his face broke into that famous Dean Martin smile, the one that had melted hearts and sold millions of records. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean slurred, his words deliberately sloppy in that way his fans found so endearing, "we have royalty in the house tonight." The audience stirred with interest. Celebrity spotting was always part of the entertainment at these high-end Vegas events. No, not Prince Charles. Dean continued with perfect comedic timing. Better than Prince Charles. We have the former heavyweight champion of the world, the man who floats like a butterfly and... He paused dramatically, letting the anticipation build. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, dodges like a draft. The room went deadly quiet. Some people laughed nervously, uncertain whether they had permission to find this funny. Others looked genuinely uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as they processed what Dean had just said. This was 1972, and the Vietnam War was still raging. Ali's refusal to serve was still deeply controversial, especially among the conservative, wealthy Americans who filled this room. Ali sat perfectly still at his table, his expression unreadable. His wife, Belinda, touched his arm worriedly. She knew that look on his face, the dangerous calm that preceded an explosion. But Ali didn't move. Not yet. Dean Martin wasn't finished. He had tasted blood in the water, and like any experienced performer, he sensed the room's energy and decided to push further. He stumbled to the edge of the stage, drink in hand. Though everyone who really knew him understood it was probably just apple juice, part of the elaborate performance he had perfected over decades. "Muhammad Ali, everybody!" Dean announced with exaggerated enthusiasm, gesturing grandly toward Ali's table. "Stand up, champ. Let these good people see you." The spotlight swung to Ali's table, bathing him in harsh white light that made him squint. Ali didn't stand. "Oh, come on," Dean pressed, his voice taking on an edge that wasn't quite as playful as before. "Don't be shy. You're never shy when there's a camera around. You're the I am the greatest guy, remember? So stand up and show these people who paid good money to be here tonight. Show them the man who was too special to serve his country." The calculated cruelty of that last line hung in the air like smoke. Dean Martin had just weaponized every stereotype, every resentment, every bit of anger that this room full of wealthy, powerful, predominantly white Americans felt toward Muhammad Ali. And it worked. Some people in the crowd started clapping, slowly at first, then building in volume as they were emboldened by the alcohol and Dean Martin's permission to express what they had been thinking. The applause grew louder and more insistent. They wanted Ali to stand up. They wanted to see him squirm under their collective judgment. They wanted him to know his place. Belinda whispered urgently, "Let's just leave." But Muhammad Ali stood up. The crowd cheered, thinking they had won, thinking Ali was going to wave politely and sit back down and let this humiliating moment pass. Dean Martin grinned triumphantly, convinced he had just delivered the perfect Vegas moment that would be talked about for years, the night he put the controversial boxer in his place in front of America's elite. Then Ali started walking toward the stage. Dean's grin faltered slightly. This wasn't part of the script he had imagined. Celebrities didn't approach the stage during his performances. They stayed in their seats, laughed at his jokes, applauded politely, and went home with amusing stories to tell at cocktail parties. But Ali kept walking, through the maze of tables, past the wealthy guests who craned their necks to watch, up the stairs, onto the stage. And without asking permission, without waiting for an invitation, he took the microphone out of Dean Martin's hand. The showroom fell into absolute silence. 2,000 of the most powerful people in America sat in stunned quiet, uncertain whether to cheer, boo, or simply watch in shock as one of the most controversial figures in the country invaded their exclusive space. Ali stood there for a long moment looking out at 2,000 faces. Rich faces, powerful faces, predominantly white faces with only a few exceptions. This was their world, their Las Vegas, their America, and he had just walked uninvited into the center of it. When Ali finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. Dangerously calm. "Thank you, Dean, for that introduction," Ali began, his famous Louisville accent carrying clearly to every corner of the silent room. "Too special to serve my country. That's what you said, right?" Dean nodded, still trying to smile, but the smile was frozen now, uncomfortable and uncertain. "See, that's interesting," Ali continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Because I don't remember ever saying I was too special. What I said was that I wouldn't kill poor people in Vietnam for rich people in America. But I guess that doesn't sound as funny when you're trying to get a laugh from a room full of rich people." A few uncomfortable coughs rippled through the audience. The atmosphere had shifted completely. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else entirely. "Dean, can I ask you a question?" Ali said, turning to face the entertainer directly. Dean shrugged, trapped now in front of his own audience. What was he going to do, say no in front of 2,000 people? Did you serve in World War E? Dean's face changed instantly. The drunk persona slipped noticeably, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. I was classified 4F for medical reasons. Medical reasons. Ali repeated. What was wrong with you? Punctured eardrum. So you couldn't serve because of your ear, Ali said, nodding as if he was genuinely trying to understand. And nobody called you a coward for that. Nobody said you dodged the draft. Nobody stripped you of your career for having a medical condition. They just said, okay, Dean's got a bad ear, he can't serve, let's move on. Is that right? Dean didn't answer. He couldn't answer because everyone in the room knew Ali was right. But me. Ali continued, turning to address the audience now, his voice rising with controlled passion. I couldn't serve because of my religious beliefs. Because my faith teaches that killing is wrong. And for that, I lost 3.5 years of my career. Lost millions of dollars. Lost my title. Almost went to prison. All because I followed my conscience instead of following orders. The room was dead silent now. No clinking of glasses, no whispered conversations, no rustling of expensive clothes. Nothing but the sound of Muhammad Ali's voice cutting through decades of assumptions and prejudices. So let me ask you something, Dean. I want you to really think about this. Ali's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it carried to every corner of the vast room. Who's the coward? The man who refuses to kill because his religion tells him it's wrong? Or the man who stands on a stage in a $5,000 tuxedo, drinking expensive liquor, making jokes about someone else's sacrifice while he's never sacrificed anything in his life? Dean Martin's face had gone pale. The drunk act was completely gone now, stripped away like makeup in the rain. He looked like he wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and escape from the truth that was being laid bare in front of everyone he had ever entertained. But Ali wasn't finished. You know what your act is, Dean. Ali's voice grew stronger, more authoritative. You pretend to be drunk. You pretend to be a carefree playboy who doesn't have a worry in the world. You sing songs about love and loss, but it's all make-believe. You've built an entire career out of pretending. And that's fine, that's entertainment. But don't you ever, Ali's voice rose for the first time, sharp with genuine anger. Don't you ever stand on a stage and mock a man for having real principles, for making real sacrifices, for standing up for something bigger than himself. Ali turned back to face the audience, 2,000 stunned faces staring back at him in absolute silence. Let me tell you what I see when I look at this room, he continued, his voice now carrying the power and rhythm that had made him famous far beyond boxing. I see a lot of rich people who have never had to make a hard choice in their lives. I see people who think patriotism means waving a flag and sending someone else's kids to war. I see people who are comfortable, safe, protected by their money and their privilege, judging a man who gave up everything rather than compromise his beliefs. Someone in the back of the room started to boo, but the sound died quickly in the overwhelming silence. Ali pointed in that direction. You want to boo me? Go ahead, boo me. But when you leave here tonight in your expensive cars and go back to your mansions, I want you to ask yourself one question. What have you ever stood up for? What have you ever sacrificed? What would you be willing to lose if your government told you to do something you believed was wrong? The booing stopped before it really started. Ali walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at the audience with something between pity and contempt. Dean called me up here to embarrass me, to make me the joke. But let me tell you who the real joke is. His voice was quiet now, but it carried the weight of absolute conviction. The real joke is all of you. Sitting here in your diamonds and your designer clothes, eating your expensive food, drinking your expensive champagne, while young boys, most of them poor, most of them black and brown, are dying in a jungle halfway around the world. And you don't care. You don't think about it. You just want to be entertained. You just want Dean Martin to sing another song and tell another joke so you can forget about the real world for a few hours. Ali placed the microphone back in its stand, gently despite the harshness of his words. I came here tonight because my lawyer said it would be good for my image. But I don't care about my image anymore. I care about my conscience. And my conscience says I don't belong in a room with people who think patriotism means blind obedience and courage means doing what you're told. He started to walk off the stage, then stopped and turned back one more time. Oh, and Dean, You might want to work on your act. The drunk thing is getting old. We all know you're not really drunk. We all know it's fake, just like everything else in this room." Muhammad Ali walked off the stage, through the silent showroom and out the door. Belinda followed him without a word. They left the Desert Inn, got in their car, and drove back to their hotel in complete silence. Inside the showroom, 2,000 of America's most powerful people sat in stunned quiet. Dean Martin stood on stage, microphone in hand, completely at a loss for what to do next. For maybe the first time in his professional career, he had no joke, no song, no charming quip to smooth things over. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Let's take a break, folks." The house lights came up. Dean Martin walked backstage, his carefully constructed persona in complete ruins. And then something happened that nobody expected, something that would remain hidden from the public for 40 years. Dean Martin, the man who never broke character, the man who had built an entire career on being unflappable, went into his dressing room and started crying. His manager found him 10 minutes later, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs he couldn't control. "Dean, what's wrong?" the manager asked, genuinely confused. "Who cares what he said? He's the one who looked bad out there, not you. Everyone's on your side." But Dean shook his head, unable to stop the tears. "He's right," Dean said through his sobs. "Everything he said, he's right." "What are you talking about?" Dean looked up, and his face was completely destroyed. The makeup was running, the carefully constructed façade was cracked beyond repair. "My father," Dean said quietly, his voice breaking. "My father came to this country from Italy when he was 13 years old. He didn't speak English. He got a job in a barber shop, and people treated him like garbage. They called him names. They told him to go back where he came from. They said Italians were dirty criminals, not real Americans." The manager had never heard Dean talk about any of this. In all their years working together, Dean Martin had never revealed this much of his true self. He changed his name. Dean continued, the words pouring out like a dam had burst. "Did you know that? His real name was Gaetano Crosetti, but he changed it to Guy Crosetti because Gaetano was too Italian. He was ashamed of who he was because this country made him ashamed." Dean stood up, pacing now, unable to sit still. "And when I started in show business, I did the same thing. I changed my name from Dino Crosetti to Dean Martin because I thought it sounded more American, more acceptable." His voice was getting louder, more desperate. "And then I created this character, this drunk playboy who doesn't care about anything. Because if you don't care about anything, nothing can hurt you. If you're always joking, always laughing, nobody can reject the real you because they never see the real you." He stopped pacing and looked directly at his manager. "And then tonight, Muhammad Ali, a man who gave up everything to stand up for what he believes, he stands on my stage and calls me out. He sees right through me. He sees that I'm a coward. Not because I didn't go to war, but because I've spent my whole life pretending to be someone I'm not. Because I've been hiding." There was a soft knock on the dressing room door. The manager opened it, and standing there, to everyone's surprise, was Muhammad Ali. "Can I talk to him?" Ali asked quietly. The manager looked at Dean, who nodded through his tears. Ali came in and closed the door behind him. For a long moment, the two men just looked at each other. The entertainer with his mask finally removed, and the boxer who had torn it away. "I'm sorry," Dean said finally. "I shouldn't have said those things. I was trying to get a laugh and I went too far." Ali sat down on the couch next to Dean. "You know why I came back here?" Dean shook his head. "Because when I walked off that stage, I realized something. I went up there angry. I was ready to destroy you, and I did. I destroyed you in front of 2,000 people. But then I got in my car and I thought, what did I just do? Did I make anything better? Or did I just hurt someone because they hurt me?" Dean looked at him with genuine surprise. "You were right about everything you said." "Maybe," Ali conceded. "But I could have said it different. I could have pulled you aside, had this conversation in private instead of embarrassing you in public, because my ego wanted revenge for you embarrassing me." Dean sat back, wiping his face. "You didn't embarrass me. You told the truth. And the truth is I've been a coward. Not about the war but about my life, about who I am." "Why the act?" Ali asked gently. "Why the drunk persona?" Dean was quiet for a long time, gathering the courage to be completely honest for perhaps the first time in his adult life. "Because when my father died," he finally said, his last words to me were in Italian. Non dimenticar chi si, don't forget who you are. But I did forget, or maybe I never knew. I just knew I wanted to be someone different. Someone they couldn't hurt. Who's they? Ali asked. Everyone. The people who looked down on Italians. The people who said we didn't belong. So I became Dean Martin, the all-American entertainer. The guy everyone loves because he doesn't threaten anyone. He's just fun, safe, non-threatening. Ali nodded slowly. I understand that more than you know. Dean looked skeptical. You're the most confident man in the world. On the outside, Ali said. But inside, I'm scared all the time. Scared I made the wrong choice. Scared I'll never box again. Scared that everything I gave up was for nothing. But I can't show that fear because if I do, everyone who's depending on me, everyone who looks to me as an example, they'll lose hope. So I have to be Muhammad Ali. I have to be the greatest. I have to be larger than life. Because if I'm not, what am I? The two men sat in silence for a moment, recognizing something fundamental in each other. We're both wearing masks, Dean said finally. Yeah, Ali agreed. But at least my mask stands for something real. It wasn't said cruelly, just honestly, and Dean nodded because he couldn't argue with the truth. They talked for another 20 minutes, really talked, perhaps more honestly than either man had talked to anyone in years. Dean told Ali about his father, about growing up poor, about the shame of being Italian in an America that didn't want Italians. Ali told Dean about growing up black in Louisville, about the stolen bicycle that led him to boxing, about the teacher who told him he'd never amount to anything. When Ali finally stood to leave, Dean stood with him. Thank you, Dean said, for coming back. Yes, I did, Ali replied, because if I destroy someone and walk away, I'm no better than the people who tried to destroy me. They shook hands. Then, impulsively, Dean pulled Ali into a hug, a real hug, not a showbiz hug, a hug between two men who had just seen each other truly for the first time. When Ali left, Dean sat back down and thought about what had just happened. His manager came back in. You okay? No, Dean said, but I'm going to be. Dean Martin went back on stage 20 minutes later. The audience was still there, waiting nervously, wondering if the show would continue. Dean walked to the microphone. No stumbling, no slurred words, no drunk act. Ladies and gentlemen, he said in a clear, sober voice that nobody in that room had ever heard before, I owe you all an apology, and I owe Muhammad Ali an apology. What I did earlier was wrong. It was cheap, it was cowardly, and it was exactly the kind of thing that makes this world uglier instead of better. The room remained silent. I've built a career on making people laugh, Dean continued. But tonight I made someone a target of that laughter. And that's not funny, that's bullying. Muhammad Ali stood up here and called me out, and he was right to do it. He was right about everything. Dean's voice broke slightly. I'm not really drunk, by the way. I know you all know that, but I want to say it out loud. It's an act. It's always been an act, and I'm tired of acting. I'm tired of pretending. So from now on, I'm going to try to be more honest in my work, in my life. Starting right now. He picked up his microphone and said, this next song, I'm going to sing it for my father. His name was Gaetano Crescetti. He was an Italian immigrant, and I spent my whole life ashamed of that. But tonight, I'm proud of it. So this is for him, and for Muhammad Ali, and for everyone who's ever had the courage to be who they really are, no matter the cost. He sang, That's Amore. But he sang it differently than he'd ever sung it before. Not as a novelty, not as a joke, but as a tribute, as a reclamation of the Italian heritage he'd spent decades running from. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, not the polite applause of earlier, but real applause, the kind that comes from being moved by something genuine. The story of what happened that night stayed mostly quiet for 40 years. But in 2012, when Dean Martin's son Richie published a book about his father, he revealed the truth about that night at the Desert Inn. After that night, Richie wrote, his father was different. He still performed the Dean Martin act. It was his brand, his career. But there was something more real underneath. He started talking about his Italian heritage publicly. He started using his real name more often. He started standing up for causes he believed in instead of just being the apolitical entertainer. Muhammad Ali cracked something open in my father that night. Richie wrote, something that had been locked away for decades. Muhammad Ali never spoke publicly about that night. When asked about it years later, he would only say, Dean Martin and I had a misunderstanding. We worked it out. He was a good man. But those who knew Ali said he carried a photograph in his wallet for years afterward. a photograph of him and Dean Martin from that night, taken by someone backstage. In it, both men are smiling, real smiles. Not the performative smiles of celebrities, but the smiles of two men who had seen each other's masks fall away and decided to be human together. Dean Martin died in 1995. At his funeral, among the flowers and tributes from Hollywood legends, there was a simple arrangement with a card that read, "You found your courage, I'm proud of you. Ali." March 3, 1972. The night Dean Martin tried to humiliate Muhammad Ali and ended up discovering who he really was underneath all the pretending. The night two men from different worlds found common ground in the most unexpected way, through truth, through vulnerability, and through the recognition that we're all just human beings trying to find our way in a complicated world. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning a fight. It's helping your opponent find their way home to themselves.